Okay, so I've spent the last week or so watching and listening to people on the internet, mostly YouTube, talk about the new Star Trek series Starfleet Academy, and wow, have the reviews been bad. Like, really bad. I've heard the characters skewered, the writing panned, the cast insulted, and the entire premise thrown aside like yesterday's leftovers. I'm not gonna lie, I hated this show before I even watched it. I decided that the minds that my favorite franchise had been entrusted to had finally gone too far and ruined it for good. I wasn't even going to watch it. I couldn't bear to watch the pile of hot garbage that it clearly was, because that's what everyone was saying it was. But then eventually, after about 2 weeks of hearing about how bad Starfleet Academy was, I found myself standing in front of my Star Trek wall, face to face with my hero, Jean-Luc Picard. I stared into those intense eyes and realized they were trying to tell me something. Captain Picard was telling me that I owe it to the Star Trek universe. No, that I owe it to myself to watch this show. So what if it's the worst thing ever filmed in an era where most things being... Oh my goodness. So what if it's the worst thing ever filmed in an era where most things being filmed are the worst thing ever filmed? I would at least get to see it and judge it for myself. So I sat down in front of my computer and watched episode 1. All 1 hour and 12 minutes of it. And all I have to say is, what is wrong with you people? That was good. That was a good episode of television. Sorry, it feels weird to call it television since I stream everything on my computer now, but still. That was good. I sat down and expected to see some unrecognizable version of Star Trek that had been beaten to a pulp by the woke bat. But it wasn't. At least it wasn't any more woke than most Star Trek has been since it premiered back in the 60s. And no, I'm not old enough to have watched it in the 60s. From the reviews I watched on YouTube, I was expecting to see, crap, what's that actor's name? Holly Hunter. I was expecting to see Holly Hunter walk onto the bridge of a starship and take a big dump in the captain's chair because she's so disrespectful to the sanctity of being a starship captain. But she was fine. I mean, I didn't necessarily like her character right away, but I'm sure she'll grow on me. And I'm pretty sure I just didn't like her right away because I really didn't like the ice cream scene with her and those two little kids. But I racked my brain and I couldn't come up with anything else about the character that really bothered me that much. And I was also expecting a bunch of annoying kids running around a starship, talking in egregiously modern slang, making the show completely unwatchable. But that just wasn't the case at all. They actually sounded an awful lot like I remember Wesley Crusher and the other Academy-aged characters on The Next Generation sounding. Like annoying teenagers who were also kind of taking this whole Starfleet thing seriously. Which is exactly how you would expect a bunch of teenagers who are also taking this whole Starfleet thing kind of seriously to sound. And the Klingon kid. Oh, I was so ready to hate the Klingon kid. Because he isn't a normal Klingon, you know. He's a woke Klingon who's going to dance through every scene he's in, throwing painted snowflakes in the air, reciting poetry, and talking about peace and love. But he wasn't. He came across as a Klingon teenager who wanted to be a scientist. As someone who watched Alexander grow up on Star Trek TNG, I can tell you that they absolutely could have done a lot worse in their portrayal of a Klingon teenager with an unconventional upbringing. I mean, okay, he likes to watch birds? That's a problem? Why is that a problem? Does the Klingon homeworld not have birds? He was fine. I actually kind of liked the character. And Hologram Girl. I'm sorry, I legitimately can't remember any of the characters' names, but that's a me thing. It has nothing to do with liking or disliking the show. Sam. Her name is Sam. That's my wife's name. I really should have had an easier time remembering that. Hologram Sam. Not a bad character. She was actually really funny. I was told to hate her, but I laughed several times, and that's after starting out pretty set against enjoying myself. I'm actually starting to feel like people reviewing this show are just straight up being dishonest. Is that allowed? Are you allowed to just lie on YouTube? What is the world coming to? I watch review videos and they complain about the show being feminized and wokeified, and their thumbnails are edited to have the characters wearing girly makeup. Their description of the plot are disingenuous, and they cherry pick clips out of context in dishonest ways. It's really annoying. People should have a little more shame. So, what did I like about episode 1 of Starfleet Academy? Actually, can I start with something that I didn't like, just to get it out of the way? I don't know why I'm asking, because I'm going to do it anyways. By the time anyone hears me ask that question, this video will be done and posted, and if for some reason you answered, it won't matter anymore. The ship. I don't like the ship. It looks stupid. I'm sorry, but it just does. The design is dumb, it doesn't make sense, and I don't like it. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because I can just ignore it. It's one little thing. One little really dumb thing. So, Starfleet Academy. I actually think the premise of the show is really cool, and it actually makes sense, and makes most of the characters make more sense. This is the Federation post some huge event that effectively wiped it out. They don't go into detail on what the burn was, only that it seems to have ended the Federation as we know it, and this series takes place while what is left of the Federation is trying to rebuild itself. Apparently they talk about the burn at some point in Discovery, but I don't remember that, so it must have been after I stopped watching that show. Stop it. Don't look at me like that. I'm not being a hypocrite, I just wasn't a big fan of Discovery. It's not like I'm on YouTube trying to shame people that do. Besides, I'll finish it someday. But anyways, I really like that as a setting for a show. It makes me want to learn more, and also right off the bat, it should make you expect Starfleet to feel a little different. I immediately feel like in this time, maybe Starfleet isn't this respected, awe-inspiring organization that young people aspire to be a part of anymore. Maybe it's more of a relic of the past, trying to rebuild itself. I don't know. I've only watched episode 1 at this point. I hope to find out as the season goes on. But whatever the specifics of the burn and what Starfleet and the Federation are at the point where Starfleet Academy takes place, the point is, they're different. Things change, in real life and in fictional worlds. This is something that Star Trek fans for decades have seemed to not been able to wrap their heads around. I see so many complaints that Star Trek has changed, that this new Star Trek isn't my Star Trek, as if they expect the Star Trek universe to be this static thing that never changes in tone or culture. Fans complained when The Next Generation came out that this wasn't their Star Trek, because where were Kirk and Spock? Why does everything look so different? Well, almost 100 years have passed. Why would you expect everything to be exactly the same? TNG was exploring a different time period than TOS was. Things actually remained fairly static with Voyager, DS9, and the TNG movies because they're looking at different bits of the same era of Star Trek. But then along comes Enterprise, and suddenly there's this shock because what is this? This isn't the Star Trek I know. By the way, I find it hilarious that fans who whine about new Trek lump in Enterprise with the good old days, before Star Trek was ruined, when at the time many fans were complaining about how different it was and said it was ruining Star Trek. But again, why wouldn't Enterprise look and feel different? It takes place over 100 years before TOS. And now, here we are with a new Star Trek series, and it takes place 800 years after TNG. And people complain that it's bad because it doesn't feel like TNG. But why would it? It's 800 years later. And not only is it 800 years later, but it's a show about a different age demographic as well. Why would you expect a show about a group of established officers serving on the flagship of the Federation at its peak to feel the same as a show about a bunch of teenage recruits in a post-Federation universe? It's okay to not like it. Everyone has their own tastes. But to say it's killing Star Trek is insane. It's just telling a different story within the Star Trek universe. I actually think over the years Star Trek has done an excellent job looking at the Federation and Starfleet at so many different points during its rise and fall. There's a story arc there to follow that too many fans brush aside. I look at the timeline with TNG being the peak of an empire. Its reach and influence were at its greatest, and it was stable and structured. There are series that explore the rise of the Federation into what it was in the TNG era, and now we have a show that explores the Federation in its decline. As for the characters, I'm not sure what all the fuss is about. One YouTuber that I've had the misfortune of seeing pop up on my feed often, I'm a sucker for clickbait sometimes and it messes with my algorithm, keeps going on about how these characters are not believable as grown men. But they aren't. Am I missing something, or are these supposed to be teenagers encountering literally the first couple days in Starfleet Academy? The only character I remember hearing an age for is Sam the Hologram, who is supposed to be 17. I assume the rest are similar age range, except maybe the main character guy who might be a year or two older. I think they said it was 15 years since he was separated from his mother, and he couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old in that opening sequence, right? So, like 19 years old max? And they act pretty much how I would expect a bunch of teenage cadets to act. And sure, a Klingon who values life, wants to be a biologist, and watches birds may be a little outside of the box when it comes to the stereotypical Klingon. But you know who else was outside of the box and didn't fit the mold of the stereotypical Klingon? Worf! The Klingon! I'm starting to think some of the people whining about this show didn't even watch TNG. I can't remember anyone ever accusing classic Star Trek of taking itself too seriously either. None of this is new. I heard another reviewer who definitely does seem to take himself a little too seriously, saying that Star Trek has always taken an optimistic approach, especially when introducing a new series. At least up until the evil Alex Kurtzman took over. I'm curious if he's referring to the optimistic nature of the Enterprise crew being put on trial by an angry godlike creature threatening to wipe out the human race like in the TNG premiere. Or perhaps he's talking about the optimism of the Voyager crew being thrown across the galaxy, half their crew being killed, and getting stranded 70 years from home like in the Voyager premiere. Or maybe he was talking about the notoriously bright and cheery Deep Space Nine that totally never dealt with any difficult themes like terrorism, genocide, slavery, or racism. People who seem to base their entire personality around hating new Star Trek really don't seem to get that Star Trek always had a bit of new Trek in it. But I was talking about Episode 1. Sorry, I get sidetracked, and these YouTubers that are trying to cash in on the hating Starfleet Academy bandwagon while it's still getting clicks really irritate me. The plot. People bash the plot, but for the life of me I cannot figure out why. Okay, let's do a thing here. What if I told you there was a script for a Star Trek TNG episode where a space pirate attacks the Enterprise and uses some device to neutralize the bridge while they steal the warp core? But they didn't account for the scrappy group of young cadets on board who worked together to use each other's talents to outwit the bad guys and save the ship. You would believe that existed, wouldn't you? Of course you would, because that 100% sounds like a TNG episode. And that's pretty much the exact plot of Episode 1 of Starfleet Academy. A plot that YouTube Star Trek fans hate so much that they feel the need to make YouTube videos about how torturous it was to watch it and how they yearn for the good old days of old Star Trek, where again, this 100% could have been the plot of an episode. The only thing it was missing was a Mary Sue character like Wesley Crusher to save the day solo. Look, I'm not saying this episode was perfect. The song at the end did tickle my cringe detector a little bit. I really could have done without that. But it wasn't cringy slop, an insult to my intelligence, or the end of Star Trek. No, of course not. Don't be stupid. I just really hope it holds together for a whole season because I would really like to keep enjoying it. I guess, in the end, what I'm trying to say is, don't take all the bad YouTube reviewers at face value, give the show a chance and watch it with an open mind. If you don't like it, that's fine. But don't do what I almost did and write it off before you even try it. Okay, thanks for watching my rant. Time to go watch episode 2. Right, Doug?